It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm your host, Brendan Clean. I cover the Suns and the NBA at SB Nation as well as Dime Magazine. Follow me on Twitter at BrendanClean14. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns. And we're back on YouTube. Week number 2 here of the show on YouTube. And Brandon is joining us because it is a Monday. He is at ZonaHoops _ on Twitter. Brandon, we were planning the show. I didn't even ask you if you wanted to talk about the epic Summer League matchup from yesterday. I didn't even give you the opportunity to discuss Jalen Smith for like the 5th time in a week. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. I decided to do some personal time and actually didn't watch the last 2 games live. I did end up catching some like highlights and stuff. So, probably not your guy to talk about that, but I don't think too many people are thrilled with that roster anyways. But good for Jalen Smith, hitting some threes and playing with energy. Overall, kind of what you expected, I guess. He did as much as he could with that supporting cast. But yeah. We'll see
what happens. I don't think it's worth beating a dead horse there, but we are here to talk about some other Suns news, including Monty Williams' appearance on the Woj Pod, some news he dropped about Devin Booker's injury back in Game 3. We'll also talk about the Athletics NBA player tiers and the Suns, an annual celebration that's unlike any other of getting mad that Suns players are not high enough on these lists, and especially Devin Booker, a guy who has broken above some of his counterparts, some of his younger guard counterparts in the NBA, but still hasn't seemingly, at least on this list and a lot of others like it, broken through to the very top of the top in the NBA. So we'll talk about what that means, what this playoff and finals run did for his reputation and what it didn't do. But Brandon, let's start with the Woj Pod. Before we get into that, though, quick, folks, today's show brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Tell them Locked On sent you. So Monty goes on the Woj Pod, which pretty cool. I mean, he went on it, I think, when he first got hired by the Suns and now is back on, but dropped, some other general coaching stuff. We heard a lot more about the early Hornets days and his regrets there and all that stuff. I thought it was a really good interview. People should check it out, but dropped a nugget that I don't know if he knew hadn't been reported. It was one of those things where I was like, I'm not sure if he realizes that he's giving us some new info here, but fans will remember, of course, Devin Booker sitting for the entire 4th quarter of Game 3. You and I actually recorded right after that game, and no one knew why. And now Monty tells us it was a hamstring injury, which obviously forced him out for Game 3 at the end, but we can probably assume affected him throughout the series. So how did you respond to hearing that news when Monty dropped that for us?
Yeah, it makes a hell of a lot more sense now, I think, because, sitting someone during a finals game that's as important as Devin Booker is to the Suns was definitely a decision that kind of on the surface seemed like a head scratcher, but that's why context is so important. There's so much stuff that we don't know about behind the scenes. So I'm not glad he was injured, but I'm glad that was the reason, and it wasn't that he was just resting in. So obviously, Booker's a trooper. He's going to try to give it his all. And it seems like in general, the Suns team, like they dealt with a lot of injuries that they just kind of swept under the rug. And despite all the narratives about, their path to the finals and injuries, they didn't want to make it about them. So I respect it.
Yeah, I think it's in line with the way Monty's operated with a lot of this stuff. So it's not a surprise necessarily that he didn't come out there and say that. I do think there is a certain element of like, would it have been helpful to be able to know? Because, the way Monty framed it in the interview was like, Book got killed for that. And I don't know if he should have. It's like, we could have helped him out by telling us, he's dealing with something. You don't have to say what it is. You don't have to say what the severity is, but it's the finals. People keep things quiet. I'm sure somebody on the Bucks had something, it happens, but that combined with the Chris Paul surgery, which I think we briefly talked about one of the times we recorded recently, came out the same day that he announced that he was coming back. Does it change how you feel about the finals? I mean, I know you said the path to the finals with the injuries. I think it's a little more even than people want to let on. I mean, the fact that AD went down and all the rest. I think the Suns had their fair share of things, but I guess more importantly, does it make you feel like that series was even more either close or like that you could even make the case the Suns had an outright advantage because they did win 2 games in a row and then had the injuries kind of hit them?
Yeah, I think at that point of the season, everyone's dealing with injuries, like you mentioned earlier. Like the Bucks probably had their fair share of guys banged up that if it was a regular season game, maybe they're not playing. But in the playoffs, especially in the finals, like you just gotta suck it up. And pretty much if you're not playing on something that's broken or like torn, you're just gonna have to play through it. Even if something's torn on your hand, like Chris Paul, even he played through that. So I mean, it's really just difficult to gauge. But I think that's just kind of what the NBA Finals are in general. It's just in the playoffs in general is just survival of the fittest. So it doesn't really change my take as far as like the series, but I do think it should be considered a little bit more, and just not, like nationally speaking, I think Booker should get more of like a tip of the cap for battling through that and continuing to put up some dominant performances after that.
Well, that's the thing that's funny is like even if you were to give him some credit there and say he had the hamstring and Game 3 could have been different, but he gave a hell of a lot in the rest of the series, right? So it'd be one thing if Booker all of a sudden was like a 12-point per game guy and we're all wondering what's going on and this was some big grand explanation. It's not really like that. Like he was pretty good and then he got the injury and then he stayed pretty good. So I agree with you. It's hard for me to say that was some sort of turning point or really changed how the series went. I do think though, Monty put it in an interesting way where he was like, we beat them 4 times in a row and they beat us 4 times in a row and theirs were just in the finals. Like that's a little bit of a simple way to put it because the regular season is a little different. But I just think it just continues to bug me how that series is being remembered, where it's like, some of these other contextual points, but also the fact that I think what gets forgotten too is like, we didn't think Giannis was going to play. You know what I mean? Like it's very quickly just become like, oh, Giannis did what Giannis does. It's like, well, we didn't even think that was going to happen. Like we were unsure if he would even play game 1, game 2. Yeah, it's absurd. So I don't know. Did anything else from that interview stick out to you? Is there anything else that, as we get a little bit of distance from that final series, that stays on your mind?
Nothing like that I'm looking into too much, but I just think Monty is the real life Ted Lasso. Just continues to just give the best quotes and like perspectives on life in general. Just you could tell he's hurting and like the competitive edge. He really wanted to win that, but at the same time he has a really positive outlook on the entire situation, and that just shows why he's the right guy for the job and why he's so well respected. And I think just the culture he's built, you could tell, like not just in that Woj interview, like he's done several interviews like podcasts and stuff like over the years, and you could just tell like right away just by his demeanor that he's just a great leader. So just kind of reinforced my pre-existing thoughts on him as a coach.
Yeah, to me it's like there's going to be some level of pain from that series. I mean, it's inevitable to come as close. Like we heard that from Mavs fans forever, right? Of how painful that 2006 series was for the same reasons. They felt like they had it in the bag and lost in the same fashion. So to have that be a part of what this team's identity is going to be, you want a guy like that, getting them past it, right? And I think that's going to be obviously a big storyline heading into camp and all the rest, but hearing his perspective, not only what he was able to say right after on the podium, but the fact that he's maintaining that even keel. Not that we'd expect anything different, but it was good to hear. Let's get into some more of these Devin Booker thoughts, frankly, because we saw The Athletic, Seth Partnow releasing his tiers, which have been really good the past few years. I learned a lot from reading them, but the Suns guys were a little low, of course, as we always, unfortunately, tend to see. So we'll get into that. We'll get into where those guys ranked, whether that was right or wrong for 5 or 6 different Suns guys, and then how this run is affecting how Devin Booker specifically is being seen around the league. First, though, a quick word from SweatBlock. So everybody has had a time in their life. I'm thinking back to, I told you guys last week when I did my undergraduate thesis in college, had to give a big presentation, and I was going to have to redo the whole thing if I didn't pass it. Like you literally get a chance to defend it, and then if it doesn't go well, then you're back to the drawing board. You have to present and do the whole thing all over again. Of course, I was nervous. Of course, I had some sweat going on. You're wearing nice clothes. You're all hot. You're whatever. And it sucks, right? Because a lot of deodorants, even the strength, extra strength, even, the ones that sell you, the ones that charge you the most, they're really not that different. They're really often ineffective. But SweatBlock is different because it's not a regular stick of deodorant. It's a wipe that you apply to your underarm, apply to wherever you have problems with sweat, and it stops it in its tracks. Not only do you not have to deal with odor, but the sweat doesn't even come out. It doesn't even cause an issue. There's not going to be moisture. There's not going to be discomfort. It just cuts it completely. So you just apply it. It works for up to 7 days. They have a dry shirt guarantee, meaning if SweatBlock doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. It's been featured and tested by firefighters in the past on the Rachel Ray Show, testing that heat and whether it breaks through. It did not. It's been a bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years. And it keeps you confident. That's really the most important thing. You get to wear whatever you want, wear whatever makes you look and feel the best. You have a secret to confidence, a little secret to confidence tucked into your back pocket. And it's small enough to fit into everyone's toiletry bag, whether it's a big presentation or a hot date. Everybody can benefit. So if you or someone you love is dealing with this, you have to check out SweatBlock. Get your own now. And you can get 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON. Again, that's 20% off at sweatblock.com with promo code LOCKEDON, or check it out at Amazon and CVS. Today's show also brought to you by Indeed. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all of your hiring in one place, even the interviewing. Don't just hope your perfect candidate will find you. Indeed's hiring tools help you cut through the noise to hire faster and smarter. Indeed Instant Match provides a list of quality candidates whose resumes are on Indeed the moment you post a sponsored job. With Indeed Assessments, you choose from 130 skills tests to help make sure you're finding applications from people with the skills you need. Indeed delivers 4 times more hires according to Talent Nest, and 3 million businesses worldwide have used Indeed to hire great talent fast. So get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credits. Upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/locked. Offer valid through September 30th. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, so NBA player tiers. Seth Partnow has done them for, I think, 2 or 3 years now, Brandon. And we were talking just a second before. This is basically the best way to think about it is which players in the NBA are going to help you win the most in the playoffs. And it's forward-looking. So it's what did we just see and what can we apply to next season if you want to win playoff games is basically the gist of it from Seth's perspective. Obviously, he's a stats guy. He worked for the Bucks in the front office as an analytics guy. And that's where he's coming at this from. But I think they're pretty accurate. He does a ton of stuff. There's dozens and dozens of players. It's not just like a top 10 or something to get clicks. And even with that context, I still can't help but feel like some of these guys are a little bit low. I think Chris Paul is at the very end of tier 2. Devin Booker's at the top of tier 3. DeAndre Ayton is down below Christian Wood, below Karis LeVert, below Al Horford. And then you have Mikal Bridges a little lower, and then Cameron Payne rounding things out for the Suns. What did you think when you saw some of those names? And quite frankly, I don't want to give a leading question, but it just felt really low for some of those guys.
Yeah. I know Seth is a big analytics guy, so I think a lot of that is tied into like why someone like Booker might not be as favorable. I know finals run where he did what he did, you'd think he'd play his way into that next tier, but instead he places him at the top of tier 3? Yeah. So I thought he was criminally underrated, like Al Horford, like you said, like no offense to the guys that great. How many like NBA GMs would take Al Horford over DeAndre Ayton? 0.
Even if it was just for next season, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The playoff run DeAndre just had alone should have him in that next tier, I think. And Mikal, like I get it. Like I get people that are a little bit lower on his offense and like question if he could actually be that third guy. But I think as a fourth guy, like you're not going to find anyone better really as a fourth option. So I think next year the leaps that DeAndre and Mikal are going to take too should help solidify them, because obviously people you'd think recency bias would elevate them a little bit, but I guess not.
Yeah, I was curious about Ayton in particular. Like we're going to talk about Booker in the next segment, so I almost don't want to spend too much time on him here. But with Ayton, it's just puzzling to me, like sort of what more does he – I mean, not what more does he need to do, because the way that Seth explains it is very reliant on shot creation. So like at the end of the day, one of his main things is going to be, can you create a shot for yourself? So if you're looking at it from that perspective, I get why Ayton would be low. But I also think, like, at the same time, you see a guy like Booker potentially punished a little bit for his defense, right? Like, he's not an elite defender. He's not really a lockdown guy, somebody you can put out to stop opposing players, whereas Ayton should be given some credit for that. Like, I feel like, do you think it's crazy to say right now Ayton's just a better defender than Al Horford?
Not at all. Yeah, I think he definitely is at this point. So that ranking's a little confusing because I think DeAndre just kind of showcased that he's a perfect playoff center. Like, I mean, he did everything they asked, like from series to series, and the Denver series, like just guarding Jokic. Even though Nikola had some big games, like DeAndre did all the little things you could ask for. So I think, this is definitely a little bit low on him, and I get it if he wants to see more. Like, you need to prove yourself next season, especially offensively. You kind of took a step back from like a pure just like numbers perspective, but yeah, I think there's still a lot more in his game, and I'm excited to watch him grow.
Yeah, so here's what he said. He said, had the season ended 3 or 4 games earlier, DeAndre Ayton might have found himself in Tier 4A or perhaps even Tier 3 after a superb first playoff run. But like the Suns overall, he appeared to run up against the limits of his own experience and confidence as the finals progressed. The dunks and authoritative finishes around the rim from the first 3 rounds and 2 games started to become the fading jumpers and soft flip shots that have bedeviled much of his early career. There's no great shame in getting bested by an all-world performance from Giannis, and the advantages in both strength and wisdom to Brook Lopez. If he uses those struggles, Ayton has every chance of becoming one of the next dominant two-way centers in the game. So, like, that's obviously high praise, but, like, he's also behind Christian Wood here. So
I hate that reasoning too, honestly. Like you're looking to like 1 round instead of just glossing over 3 rounds. To me, that's just like ignoring a much larger sample size and like punishing a guy for, Giannis is Giannis. I mean, who's gonna stop him, especially when he's like in that. I've never seen him take it to that level. So I get the reasoning, but
that's true.
I just don't. It just seems to me that it's like you're kind of just looking over the first 3 rounds by stating that argument.
Like, imagine if the finals had been against the Clippers. Imagine if that Clippers series had been the finals. How would and Seth admits that, like he says in the thing, if it had ended a little bit sooner, but it's like, okay, well, I mean, we could have said after the 2011 finals that LeBron can't ever win a champion. Like, when people did that and it was dumb, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. It did feel a little bit weird where it's like the guy proved quite a bit to us, and still we don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt. However, I do want to give some like credence to the shot creation thing, because if we're kind of looking toward the future a little bit here, the season's now way past and we're kind of, moving on to next season. It is pretty important that Ayton starts to be able to create shots for himself and or his teammates. Like, that has to happen this season, I feel like.
Definitely. And I think it's like this year I'd like to see him just attack like bigger centers off the dribble, because I think it's just going to catch him off guard. Like, it's not really on the scouting report, look out for DeAndre to put it on the floor, because he can do that. He can put like 1 or 2 dribble combos that are just a straight line drive and get to the rim pretty much every time if he really wanted to. It just seems like last season he was really trying to play into the system a little bit, and like he wasn't comfortable being assertive at times, which I get because you're playing with Chris Paul, Hall of Fame point guard, and you're not trying to piss him off. So I think hopefully with like this season just getting more comfortable and used to the offense, he could add some new wrinkles in. And I think offensively they're going to need more from him for sure. Like, I think him and Bridges have to take a leap and maybe not become that solid third option like right away, but if those two can alternate each night, you're getting something out of those, like at least one of them, to like, you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, with Ayton, I think it's integral, and it's funny that he's so he's right below Wood, because some of those games, those 2 Rockets games late in the season, I think around April, where he was just taking it to Wood, were one of the first indications for a lot of us that were okay, this guy, he has something here. So I think he probably learned a lot in that playoff run about how he can wield his advantages, and I think we should see a better version of him. If we don't, it's obviously trouble. I think Mikal Bridges is the other guy. And actually, I think Ayton and Booker were a lot lower than I would have had them, but I actually do think that Bridges was pretty, I wouldn't say high, but at least properly ranked to me. I mean, he's above OG Anunoby, Spencer Dinwiddie, Tobias Harris, Andrew Wiggins, a lot of guys that I think most NBA fans would probably, D'Angelo Russell, NBA fans would probably think Bridges is not better than those guys. So I hope that, I guess it doesn't really matter what like everybody thinks of Mikal Bridges, but I think it shows that, the analytics, the quote unquote, like, smart research-based basketball appreciators like Mikal and what he does shows up in that way. But I agree with you too. If we're talking about shot creation, it's pretty obvious why he's below. Like, he's below Dylan Brooks and Derrick Rose on this list, and I think that's why. Like, he's another guy where you can't possibly say everybody on this roster needs to become a scorer because that's just not practical. But he at least needs to be assertive. He needs to be aggressive. He needs to be confident playing and scoring in his role when those chances arise. And I do think he's a guy that at times in the finals especially, that didn't always happen. And I'm not saying that's the reason they lost, but you start to add a lot of these things up, and it's like they would have had a better shot if, I think as Seth writes, like they kind of ran up against, I think, a little bit of a confidence wall at times. I think Bridges was especially a culprit on it.
Yeah, no, I think he's about in like the right range. I think that group of guys, obviously he's a little bit younger than some of them, so maybe that factors into his upside. Yeah, I think he definitely needs to add a little bit more consistency offensively this next season. I think that's the next step for him, and DeAndre as well. Like, those two guys, as far as like the intangibles and little things, like I really love their improvements last season, but now it's just about, for Mikal, it's always confidence, and DeAndre too. Obviously, any young player, when you're confident, you can get things going quick, and we've seen Mikal take over at times where, he'll hit some like fadeaways off the dribble, or just let it fly from three, and it seems like it's going in every time. So we just need to see that more consistently, I think, and especially the off the dribble stuff. Like when him and Booker in the post game interview were talking about the mid range jumper and joking around about it. I think that's probably the next part of Mikal's game, and who better to learn from than Chris Paul and Devin Booker. So I think just adding that into his game and continuing to just shoot threes without hesitations, like the next step for him. And DeAndre just putting the ball on the floor more often and just drawing fouls. Like, he could take a lot away from what Giannis did. Obviously, he's not as mobile or fluid as Giannis is, because no one is, but he's still very agile and can get where he wants. Like, sometimes I'm just like, I don't think he realizes how quick he is for his size. And once he learns how to use that, I think it's going to generate a lot of easy looks for him.
Yeah, and I think he can dribble in a way that he couldn't before. I think he developed that over the course of last season, and he hasn't had an off season to actually build it into his game, build moves, build structure out of the ability that he has. I think he's added a lot of skill since he came into the NBA, so I'm excited to see what it looks like when it's put into practice. Let's talk about Devin Booker here, though, because I think we need to devote an entire segment to him, not only with just these rankings, but also just he's a guy that we've argued about a lot in these things over the years. And despite this run, still not quite taking that leap in terms of rankings that Suns fans might want to see. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Again, it doesn't exactly matter what The Athletic puts him at a ranking, but it is helpful to kind of get where he's thought of in the NBA. So we'll get to that in just a second. First, though, a quick word from Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it can be pretty difficult these days to just walk into a chain store or, heaven forbid, a car dealership and expect to get what you need at an affordable price. Rock Auto comes in right there for you, helps you find what you need simply, easy, and efficiently, and most importantly, cheaply. Why spend 30, 50, even 100% more on the same exact part at a dealership or store when you could go to rockauto.com? If you have a computer, if you have a phone that has access to the internet, which I'm sure every single one of you does, rockauto.com is right there. They are a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers like me and you for 20 years. They don't even require an account or a subscription to log on, and they make it easy. Once again, type in the car that you have, scroll down to the part that you need, click purchase, and it is at your doorstep in days. So go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and when you make your purchase, write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Today's show also brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever, my favorite protein bar, and really, really, truly, the best way to describe it is actually the healthiest candy bar ever, because that is what it tastes like. Making my way through another box from the kind folks at Built Bar. Met with them, actually, because they are opening a distribution center here in the Valley. That's the big news of the month here on the Locked On Suns podcast. They are joining our community. They've been part of our community, the smaller hour on Locked On Suns, for years, but they are joining the Phoenix community, and they're going to be announcing themselves huge. But the most important part to you is you can get your bars quicker. They're going to have a distribution. Think about how it is with some of the companies around here that have a place right next door, right in the Valley, and how quickly you get stuff delivered. That is going to be what Built Bar is like. Extra important so you don't get them melty or anything like that. I know that Valley sun can beat down. Not going to be an issue. So try your favorite Built Bar again. Order a classic. Try something new, whatever strikes your fancy. And don't forget the promo code LOCKED15. That's BuiltBar.com. Promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your first order. Promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All righty. Let's close out the show, Brandon, talking Devin Booker here, and a player who, again, is at the top of Tier 3 here by Seth Partnow over at the Athletics rankings. Above Drew Holiday, above Trae Young, above Zion Williamson, but conspicuously a little low. Has not broken into that elite of the elite. What did you make of Booker specifically? I know we talked about it a little bit, but especially I feel like we saw him add, I think he looked better defensively during the playoffs than I thought he would. The pull-up shooting, if we're talking about shot creation, like he had that better than he's used to, or better than we're used to seeing out of him. And I honestly, like, I don't know if it's overrating the Olympics, but like to be able to go there and kind of be a glue guy, I don't know. Like I just have a hard time not seeing Booker at the Bam, Tatum, that level, which is, a separate tier from him. They put him a few guys below that and made it its own tier. So clearly that's a point. That's very intentional. What did you make of all of it?
Yeah, so I mean, if he's putting shot creation as one of his priorities, then I just want to hear the reasoning for Bam being a tier above Booker, because that does not make any sense to me. And I think Booker's defense also. Yeah. I think Booker's defense did take a leap to the point where he was at least neutral most of the time. Like he saw his lapses off ball, it's going to happen. But the on ball stuff was really encouraging. It seemed like, Middleton obviously and Paul George as well. Those guys are going to hit shots no matter what. But it just seemed like there was times where he was guarding them really well and they just made tough shots, and you can live with that. But I think his physicality on the on ball stuff has always been there, just the competitive edge he has. So, I think overall, if he can just continue to work towards being neutral or even slightly above average defensively, which I think he can, then I think that's going to raise his ceiling moving forward for sure. So, I think in the Athletics just one ranking too. So I think it's important to kind of wait for, I guess, more of the mainstream, like Bleacher Report, ESPN, stuff like that, see where he's ranked there at the start of the season, because I think on some of those outlets, he's probably going to be a little bit more, a little higher ranked, I would imagine, but we'll see. The Suns are.
I want him to be high on the nitty gritty. I'm gonna do my homework rankings. I don't really like the popularity contest ones.
That's true.
Are a little less important to me. I get you though, because I do think there is a yin and yang to it, and I don't think that the Athletic that Seth is just the end all be all. I don't think he would claim that of himself, but I think it would feel nice. I think the Sports Illustrated guys do a good job. I'm curious to see where they go, because I know that they really, do their homework on a lot of stuff. And especially Jeremy Woo has seen all these guys since high school. He's their draft guy. He usually works on their rankings. They've changed it over the years. They have a new staff. I know Rob Mahoney used to do it. I really like his work, but we'll have to see. I agree. Yeah. It is going to be interesting.
ESPN's is terrible. It's all just trying to cause controversy. So I don't put much stock into that, but it's just funny
trying to cause controversy, and it's putting the guys who are going to get headline clicks at the top, I think, personally. Wasn't Trae Young just stupid high last year?
Yeah. and they just like they know what they're doing too. Like they're probably going to rank like a Nick too low or too high or something. And
LaMelo will be top 10 just because.
Yeah.
Okay, let
they
me
know what
read.
they're doing, so
They know what they're doing. Let me read you some of the key part from Seth. So he said on Booker, he said many, including me, were critical of his offensive approach in the finals, where the Bucks' scheme of guarding him one-on-one for the most part resulted in a lot of mid-range jumpers. While Booker is an elite mid-range scorer, one of only a handful of players to hit more than 50% of their self-created twos last season, pushing him toward those shots and away from rim attacks and free throws drawn, as well as driving kicks to teammates, helped transform a great scorer into just a pretty good one for that series. So he has some stats. Free throw rate went down, assist rate went down, and rim rate, like how many of his field goals were at the rim compared to his total field goals, was way down compared to the Lakers and the Clippers series. So I'm wondering where you come down on the Booker part, because it is true his style wasn't like the absolute most efficient, but I also feel like it's the finals and he still was scoring and he still was able to make life a little harder on Chris Middleton. Again, it feels like it's sort of nitpicking on the finals a little bit to say, solely because of his limitations in that series that he's going to get knocked. Like, Bam didn't necessarily play excellently in the finals. Like I just, the young player part, I have trouble with.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just kind of a combination of a lot of things. Like the Bucks defense is great. Also with Chris Paul dealing with an injury and like your 3 and 4 options not really stepping up offensively. There's just kind of a lot of a burden on him, I think. So not to say that he needed more help, but he probably needed more help. And I think that's just kind of like a collective thing more than anything. So I think, and that also plays into like the defense thing, right? Where it's like you're asking him to have such a huge offensive workload that, playing defense, like the fact that he was so competitive consistently on that end is exhausting. So I think that could also that should be taken into account when measuring his efficiency and stuff like that, because he's never really played, I think, this hard defensively consistently in his career. So that takes a toll as well. So overall, I don't think it's like a major talking point, but if it becomes like a trend, then maybe it's something to look at. But overall, I think he just did what he had to do as far as like taking a bunch of shots and tough shots, because that's kind of what the Bucks were, leading him into doing.
Yeah, I mean, I also just to put a point on it, I guess, to me, part of the problem with looking at it that way is that was his style. Like, I get that, like, the chart shows he didn't quite attack the rim as much as he did against the Lakers or the Clippers. But at the same time, like, even those numbers that he kind of descended from, those weren't high either. And we weren't saying, oh, he needs to attack. I mean, we were saying that a little bit against the Clippers, but they got the job done. We weren't really saying that against the Lakers. And then against the Nuggets, he hardly ever drove to the basket. If the number, I think it was like 5.4% of his shots were at the rim in that series, and they swept him. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's not his style, and it's fine. It's kind of like, oh, well, I guess like Kobe's not a great example because he did get to the free throw line. And that's one thing I think Booker could use to do a little bit more of, because he's such a good free throw shooter that he should be getting there, in a big game. He should be dead set on getting there 10 times plus a game. Because that one I agree with. But like sort of driving just for the sake of driving when a 2-point jumper or one of those like paint twos that he does where he'll like turn it into a little floater or a little jumper,